The Uncharted Territories is a podcast about seeing the unseen in the world of matter. Join me, Shara Prophet, the Mind Magic Coach, and my partner, astrologer Scott Tajirian, as we take an esoteric look this season into the life, death, and afterlife of a variety of celebrities and public figures who lost their lives prematurely or unexpectedly.
Here we are, Shara.
Yes,
Episode 1.
here we are.
Episode 1. So great to be here with you. So excited to share the knowledge with you. Today we're looking at John F. Kennedy, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, JFK, the 35th President of the United States of America. He is somebody who is definitely synonymous with conspiracy, so this is a very exciting first episode.
Oh, yeah.
To begin, yes. So I want to get into what you do, Shara, and how you come into contact with spirits. Is that what I'm saying? Yes.
Yes.
So how do you do this, Shara?
Well, just to let everybody know out there, I'm an energy healer and a certified hypnotherapist and a mystic. And I help people understand how the mind works so they can harness the energy of the subconscious and tap into their inner power, and they can make positive long-term changes in their life. I also do that not just with living people here on this side of the veil, but also on the other side of the veil. So sometimes I will use their favorite music, their favorite food. I'll light a candle. Or sometimes I just sit in meditation and call forth their energy and only their energy. And I make sure I do, my own protections and things like that, because when you're opening yourself up mentally like that, you're tapping into other dimensions and, there's some things out there that would like to attach itself to you. So you have to make sure you're very, very protected. And I do that. And then once I can feel them enter the room, we begin chatting.
So you protect yourself and then you invite the 35th President of the United States into your home.
Yes.
Yes.
When you say it like that, it just sounds so weird.
Because it is weird.
It is.
But that's why I love it. That's why I'm here, because
it's weird.
Yes, it's fascinating. And so the way that we're doing this is Shara's going to communicate what she has learned from the spirit of JFK, and I'm going to look as an astrologer. Astrology is a language that communicates how the planets and stars influence life on Earth, and as an astrologer, I'm an interpreter of this language. So I'm looking at JFK's astrological code, where the planets and stars were aligned the day that he was born, and then I'm looking at how the planets and stars were aligned in relation to his astrological code on the day that he was assassinated. And then we're comparing notes basically here.
Yeah,
yes.
I'm excited.
Yes,
I'm excited.
I'm very excited. So tell me, how did you bring JFK into your domicile?
When he came in very cool, kind of carefree, nonchalant, and his energy felt light to me. It didn't feel heavy the way I thought it would, and it felt very, very light. He was smoking.
Okay.
And I offered him a drink of whiskey.
You had that available?
I had it available already.
You knew that he was he hung out with Sinatra and those guys. So you're like, he might like some of this.
I looked up some of his favorite music. I try not to do too much research because I want to make sure that the information that's coming in is as pure as possible.
Yes.
But I did want to find out what some of his favorite things were. So I looked up some of his favorite music and I made a little playlist on YouTube and kind of played that and played some Sinatra and had some whiskey there so he could feel comfortable and invited to come in. And he actually prefers brandy or scotch. So, but he drank the whiskey. He was happy with that. And I had a little sip too with him. So it was fun. It was fun.
Nice.
And he was wearing a gray suit and it was very, very well made, very well tailored, and he sat with his legs crossed. I have a chair like at the foot of my bed, and he sat there with his legs crossed. We just started talking, and he came real easy, like real smooth, and kind of a little flirtatious, because I'm like, well, of course, yeah.
He was a ladies' man.
Given your
reputation,
sir. But very, very gentlemanly. Like I never felt disrespected or anything. It was just very, very smooth. And he seems to be at peace where he is, which is good, because sometimes when they have such a tragic ending, it's very difficult for them to find their peace. But, that happened a really long time ago.
Sure.
So he's had some time to kind of go through that process. Now, that doesn't mean that just because the time has passed that every single person who passes over has that same experience. Some of them are still having a difficult time. But he came in very easy. But there is like a subtle darkness and a deepness, that's also there. And like there's just like this acceptance that he kind of has. And it's kind of like a layer of regret almost kind of underneath it. And I guess with what I do, I can kind of tap in to see beneath that exterior.
Yes.
So even though he came in really cool and he was at peace, there was like this deep regret, but also an acceptance of what happened. But also I really kind of wish it didn't happen that way, but it is what it is. And this is where I am now. That kind of a thing.
Totally. Right.
And, and he does wish that it ended differently, for sure. I mean, for obvious reasons, children and people who loved him. Yeah. And for all intents and purposes, he enjoyed living, but there was a lot of stuff that we'll get into.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
We'll definitely get into that.
Just to kind of confirm some of what you're talking about here, like especially you said how he was charming when he came into the room. So JFK is a Libra rising. That means the sign that was ascending along the horizon when he was born was Libra. And Libra, the ascendant, this is your outer shell, your face, your body, your personality, the essence of your soul. This is what you're showing people when you are around those that you don't know, or in situations where you feel threatened, uncomfortable. If you're in places that are unfamiliar, what you're showing is your rising sign. So JFK was born with Libra rising on the horizon, so that's what he would show you initially. Libra is symbolized by the scales, which represents balance, harmony, equanimity, grace, charm. It's an air sign. Air is synonymous with communication because you hear communication, you hear words through the air. And it's ruled by Venus. Venus is Lady Luck, the goddess of love and beauty. And so people that are Libra rising typically are very charming, especially with people that they don't know. Now, the darkness that you talked about, he has a lot of 8th house energy. He has the sun, which is the giver of light, life, and vitality. Mars, which is the god of war. Mercury, which is the planet of communication, the guide of souls of the underworld, messenger of the gods. Jupiter, the god of thunder, Lord of Justice, and then Venus, which we mentioned earlier. All 5 of those planets are in the 8th house, which is the house of death. This is associated with the 8th sign, which is Scorpio. It's the deepest, darkest, most passionate sign. So this would reflect his sort of dark inner nature, where even though he's charming, he's got the shadow side.
That makes perfect sense because that's exactly what I picked up on.
Cool.
Okay. I love it.
Yes, yes.
Awesome. Well, let's get into his childhood.
Okay. Yes. Let's start at the beginning.
Okay. So, strict mother, absentee father. Okay. Strict mother and absentee father. And also, before we get too deep into it, I want to talk about the overall theme of life.
Yes, right? The theme of his life. You asked all of our subjects, right, what the theme of their life was?
Yes, indeed. And his was... So the overall theme of life for JFK was responsibility. He felt like it was his responsibility to play out his role, even though, as we will find later on, even though that was not necessarily his true calling in life, but it was programmed into him as a child through his parents because it was the family business, you know? And he felt this deep responsibility, not only to his family, but also to his country. And because of that, a lot of things that transpired throughout his life was a reflection of that inner conflict, you know? So let's talk a little bit about that childhood. So strict mother, absentee father, dad worked a lot, but the household overall was loving. It was a loving household, but it definitely had its dark closets. You know what I mean? Like had its things going on, but for the most part, he says that it was a loving household.
Just to back up what you just said, strict mother. So Saturn, which is the planet of limitation, the planet of responsibility, hard work, mastery. When JFK was born, it was in Cancer. Cancer is the sign that's associated with the mother because Cancer is ruled by the moon. The moon is the mother. It was in the 10th house, which is the house that Saturn rules because Saturn rules Capricorn, which is the 10th sign, 10th house, 10th sign. So having that planet of restriction in the sign of the mother would indicate a disciplinarian as a mother.
Yeah.
The 10th house is also the house that is often associated with the mother. The 4th house, the house of home, is actually associated with the father, though it can go either way. But I found it interesting that you said absentee because the 4th house, Uranus, which is the planet of rebellion, independence, the unexpected, it's the unique nature, was in the sign that it rules, Aquarius. So that gave Uranus more power, but it was in the 4th house, which would represent his father. So that could indicate a father who was very unique, did things differently, outside the norm, not conventional. Does that sort of line up?
Yes.
Okay.
Big time.
Because I know you're going to tell me some more about some crazy stuff that was divulged, but also the responsibility aspect. JFK's North Node, which represents the soul's purpose, was in the sign of Capricorn, which is the sign that represents responsibility, hard work, achievement, authority.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So again, family business was in politics. The parents had high expectations of the children to be in positions of power. That was the main goal there. And that is what everybody was whipped into shape to do. Parents did a lot of fighting, but a lot of laughing, he said. So I think that's where he associates the loving household with, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
And let me just say this really quickly. All people tend to have their own interpretation of what their childhood was like. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So to us, we may be like, oh, that's weird or that's too much. But because they grew up in the household, you know, what appears to be dysfunctional for me may be completely normal to you.
Right. Or to the sibling. You're raised in a different household than your brothers and sisters because you're being brought up at a couple years difference, few years difference. It's a different household. But you can also see the difference in the astrological codes, how each child is going to have their own unique experience of what it was like to be raised by the same two parents.
Exactly. And it's kind of crazy like that because I hear people, friends of mine, are like, we grew up in the same house. I don't understand why it was so difficult for them. And I'm like, well, they had a completely different experience than you did.
Yes.
Because I'm pretty sure your parents, they shifted, they changed. Things were happening within them and within their relationship that you may not have been privy to.
Yep.
And that energy, the child picks up on that energy from birth, from before birth. While they're in the womb, they're picking up on all of that energy.
Yep.
So you may have come along at a time where things were really great and smooth, and that was your interpretation. But by the time your sister or your brother came along 5 years later, it was a totally different scenario.
Yes.
So I want people to just keep that in mind.
Absolutely. It's a great point.
Yes. Okay. So a lot of fighting, a lot of laughing between mom and dad. Now, mom was having an affair with a businessman who he's saying he was a professor in town. Again, I'm not sure how accurate this is. I'm totally reading energy. So if anybody out there has any concrete evidence for that, I'd be more than happy to hear that. He was a close friend of the family, this person that mom was having an affair with, allegedly, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And mother thought that no one knew. This is him telling me this. Mother thought that mother thought no one knew, but all us kids knew about the affair. But we didn't blame her because dad was gone a lot working. Mm-hmm. Okay. So this gives me the inclination that the father was probably what we call in the hypnotherapy world an emotional sexual. An emotional sexual tends to put their work life and money as the priority, while on the opposite end of that is a physical sexual who tends to put sex, love, relationships at the very top of the list. Okay. So you can think about that in your own relationships.
Yes. Interesting.
Mom wanted dad's attention. I feel like mom was probably a lower physical sexual because she was able to compartmentalize, and a higher physical sexual will sometimes become very clingy. But I think she learned his behavior. And so she learned how to kind of operate and navigate within that behavior so that she could survive.
Yeah.
Pretty much, you know?
Okay.
And dad was always gone. And he also had many affairs. So this is very, very telling.
Well, yeah.
How he formed his relationships as he got older.
Totally. Mm-hmm. Totally. And I just keep thinking about this Uranus in the 4th house in Aquarius. This doesn't sound like a normal family. No. Or the Ozzy and Harriet type of, they did their own thing. And it maybe wasn't news. It was kept under wraps or whatever, but you do you, I'll do me, and that's our agreement.
I think people in those positions think that in their minds, the most important thing is the position, is the big grand goal. So yes, feelings, emotions, and things like that tend to be buried. And the way they tend to deal with it is through extramarital affairs, alcohol, drugs, whatever, overworking, burying themselves in things that help to numb the pain.
Wow.
So they were raised Protestant. I see Christian, Catholic, and then Protestant. Okay. I don't know why that's there, but
he was Catholic.
Okay.
Yeah. I think because that was a big deal. He was the first Catholic elected to the presidency. It was a big scandal. Okay. Whoa, a Catholic. It's crazy.
I wrote down Christian/Catholic -Protestant. So from his point of view, there was no sexual abuse in the home. Okay. So he said sometimes dad would get really physical with us boys, and there was a lot of mental, emotional, and verbal abuse, but it was all a part of the conditioning process. Okay. Because he had to whip them into shape for this life. And so he goes on to say that he and his brothers, they loved each other. And there was like this friendly type of competition. And there was some jealousy. I mean, come on, it's got to be when you're raised that way. And I'm pretty sure mom and dad played into that as well.
The competition. They wanted the competition because they wanted their kids to be the best.
Exactly.
And so they had to pit them against each other a little bit.
Yeah.
I've talked about Uranus being in the 4th house in Aquarius, but his 4th house line is actually in Capricorn. And that's all about achievement. That's structure. That's being rigid. That's about you've got to set goals, family goals. That's what the 4th house in Capricorn is all about. And that's where JFK's was.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. And then he said mainly the jealousy was Bobby and Teddy being jealous of him. Bobby and Teddy were jealous of him. Teddy was jealous of Bobby. All three of us were jealous of their sister.
Okay.
Because she was kind of like the weird one, but in a cool way. And they were jealous of her freedom pretty much. The fact that she kind of just, did whatever she wanted to do.
Sure. not as much pressure on her, maybe.
Yeah, and she was a bit of a black sheep, and the parents didn't have as high of an expectation of her because all of the pressure was put on the boys.
Okay.
To go into this arena of politics.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's very interesting dynamic in the family unit there.
Well, and there was an older brother too, Joseph Kennedy. Yes. He was the oldest. Then it was John, but he died in World War II. Yes.
Yep. So all of it fell on to John.
Yep. Exactly.
So, and he said that the brothers, they liked to swap each other's women.
Wow.
I know, right?
Fascinating.
Very fascinating, right? But I can see that, I could see that. And it wasn't every single woman. They kind of knew who they could do this with, you know how it gets.
I guess so. Like, I don't know. I don't have a brother, so.
I don't either. I mean, but I can only imagine like growing up in that household, the money, the pressure,
a lot of testosterone.
What they're being groomed for. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, all of that plays into that power, that power building, that masculine power building. And I'm pretty sure they had a lot of women who were willing to be swapped.
Yeah.
Yeah. Swapped and swabbed.
Wow. Well, with those 5 planets that I mentioned in the 8th house, the house of death, which is associated with the 8th sign, which is Scorpio, which is synonymous with sex, secrets, the taboo, what's going on behind closed doors in the shadows that we're not going to tell people about. I mean, that's a big part of his astrological code. So, I mean, to know the secrets of JFK is to know some things.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
So, yes, I'm fascinated to know.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, this is all for entertainment purposes. I must preface that, right? It's all for entertainment purposes. And this is the energy that I am interpreting and picking up on. So if there is anybody out there that knows the family really well and you want to correct me, please correct me if I'm wrong.
He was a saint. How dare you speak of Jack Kennedy like that?
He's a perfect gentleman.
Yes.
I have to say he's a perfect gentleman considering, some of the things that he's had to experience in his life.
We're not here to judge.
Not at all.
We're not judging anything.
I can't judge anybody.
Exactly.
Good heavens. Wait till somebody does a mediumship on me.
Oh, boy.
When I pass over. I was like, oh, my God. I didn't know she did all of that.
Yeah. You got 8th house planets, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, yeah. Hello. Yeah. So childhood-wise.
I also want to say one other thing about the childhood is the moon represents the childhood, because when you look at the moon and you see the moon in the sky, you're able to see it because it reflects the light of the sun. Therefore, the light that's emanating off the moon is literally past light. Therefore, the moon represents your past, your upbringing, your childhood. And JFK's moon was in Virgo when he was born. So Virgo is all about perfection. It's about focusing on the details. It's about really being analytical and driven in his emotions to really find that perfection at whatever he's doing. So that could also be some of the rigidness that he felt in his upbringing. Like, it's not good enough.
Yep.
Got to be better. Got to be better than that.
Yep.
So just continual pushing.
Yeah. And that pushing ultimately kind of was his undoing, to be honest, We'll go deeper into that as we continue on with this adventure.
Yes.
This deep dive.
And when you're talking about the relations and that sort of stuff, and this is why there's no judgment at all, because JFK, he was born with the sun, which is the giver of light, life, and vitality. This is the battery that's charging your human ship. The sun and Venus, the planet of relationships, were both in Gemini when JFK was born. Gemini is symbolized by the twins. There's 2 of them, so expecting a Gemini, somebody with the sun and Venus in Gemini, to keep their eyes trained on one person at all times.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not really a fair task for them. I feel bad for all the Geminis out there that live in this world where it's like, you have to be with one person for the entirety of your life. It's like, no, that doesn't really work for them. So I don't blame him for having a wandering eye, or if he was hooking up with his brother's girlfriend or whatever it may be.
I mean,
they want to try it all. They want all 32 flavors.
Yeah.
They're here to learn a little bit about a lot. And JFK's North Node, his soul's purpose, was in the third house. In addition to being in Capricorn, the third house is associated with the third sign, which is Gemini. So he was meant to be curious. Yeah. He was meant to learn a little bit about a lot, be intimate with a lot of women.
Yeah. Gotta, dip and dive into all of the experience.
That's it, Shara. Yes.
Take a little splash.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely. Okay, well, that is a great segue. Let's talk about his life. Okay, so we already talked about the running theme of his life was responsibility, right?
Yes.
In his words, as we were communicating, I had a responsibility to the world to make it a better place. And he really wore that badge of honor. He really, really did, you know. It was not a show. It was not to try to make people think he was better than he is. That was really how he felt. That's how he operated. And then he said, that is what killed me.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So he said that he spent his life living up to that responsibility. Though he was groomed for politics, he really wanted to be a musician. That was his heart's desire. And I don't know if many people knew that. He loved the piano. He also loved the saxophone, and he loved singing, but was never allowed to really, he was allowed to play with it a little bit, but it wasn't nurtured. It really wasn't nurtured. And his father insisted on a career in politics. So here we have a creative, sensitive being who wants to play in the arts, who wants to use music as an outlet, and is being constricted and not allowed to do that. Even if he was taking lessons and things like that, I don't know for sure, but I'm picking up that he really wasn't allowed to do that. If he did play a little bit, it wasn't because it was nurtured. You know what I mean? Yeah,
it's probably more just to have the variety of the experience. Yeah, but that's not what you're doing.
Culture him and to make him well-rounded. Exactly. But you know what the focus is, you know? And he said that he wanted to be a composer. That was one of his dreams. And the anger that he felt towards his parents, it manifested in his kidneys and in his lower back.
That is wild. That is super wild. The reason is because when I think of music and I think of astrology, I think of two signs. I think of Pisces because that's dreams. Music takes you into an ethereal world, a dream world. But I also think of Libra because Libra is about harmony. And music is harmonizing. Libra is an air sign. Music is communication, communicating beautiful harmony. And his ascendant, as I said earlier, was in Libra. And Libra is the sign that rules the kidneys. So it's almost
interesting.
Him not being able to fulfill that creative expression that he wanted, it rematerialized in some nefarious way in his kidneys. And that's exactly the part of the body that is ruled by Libra.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Trips me out, yes.
Well, that's what happens. If you do some research, you can kind of find out for yourself that the majority of illnesses, diseases take place in the body because of unprocessed emotions or suppressed emotions. And so this is a perfect example of someone who was not allowed to channel that energy and have that creative outlet. They were forced into something and programmed to think that that was their purpose. But the subconscious mind always knows the truth.
Exactly.
The core of your truth lives in your subconscious mind. So it does not matter what program you're running off of. At the core of you, if you're not living the life that you truly are here to live, it will and can take you out of here.
Yep.
Whether it's a bullet to the head or a heart attack.
Exactly.
So the kidneys, let's talk about the body and what it represents emotionally. The kidneys hold anger, and the lower back denotes instability and father issues. And if you have any financial issues, that wasn't a problem for him. But if you have financial issues, you may notice a lot of pain in your lower back. Okay? Because that's right around the root chakra. And the root chakra is all about family, stability, your roots, your traditions, things like that. And so he also had ulcers, which indicates frustration, shame, and guilt.
And what does that mean? Ulcers, like where would those be?
Your ulcers would take place in your belly.
So here's something else that's blowing my mind, because Chiron is known as the wounded healer. This represents where you have a wound that you feel like you can't recover from. And when JFK was born, Chiron was in Pisces, which is one of the music signs, and it was in the 6th house. The 6th house is associated with the 6th sign, which is Virgo, which is the same place where his moon was in Virgo when he was born. And Virgo is the sign that rules the intestines.
Wow.
So he had a wound in his intestines.
Oh, yeah.
In relation to not fulfilling his true dreams. Pisces is dreams. So the wound was in the dreams, in the intestines, and it rematerialized in his intestines.
And that makes absolute sense, because usually when we're experiencing issues in the stomach area, that's usually related to some sort of issue with the mother. So both of his illnesses reflected his relationship with the parents.
Yes. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. The moon in his chart was also in very stressful alignment with his Venus. So the mother and his relationship with women, there was stress and tension there.
Yeah, absolutely, big time. He took antacids at least 2 times daily. And then again, he says, I was conditioned to do this job, but deep down, I didn't want to.
Wow.
But that was something that he kind of knew in the back of his mind while he was here, living in the physical realm. But it didn't really become that clear to him until he passed over.
What became clear? That he shouldn't have been president, or that he should have done what he wanted to do?
That deep down, he didn't want to do that.
Yes.
But he was programmed to believe this is what I'm supposed to be doing here. But there was just this thing within him that wanted to do the other thing. But if you're told from a very early age, no, this is what you're doing, this is right.
Yeah.
That thing gets pushed all the way to the back, but it does not leave. And it can show up in your life in many, many other ways, That's how the planets send you a message. When you get sick and something happens to your body, it's time to start paying attention to what's going on inside of you. Yeah. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Yes, absolutely. And this also contributed to his drinking as well. He was in a lot of pain. So the drinking would help take away the pain, or make him forget about it.
Yes.
There was also a host of STDs present. Okay, including
nice.
All right. I mean, it's kind of expected given his extracurricular activities. Again, no judgment, right?
None at all.
Those included genital warts. He also had blinding migraines that started when he was in college, he says.
Well, I would also attribute the migraines to the 6th house in Chiron, because the 6th house and Virgo are both ruled by Mercury. Mercury's the mind. So that's a wound to the mind in a sense. Yeah. And his moon in Virgo, again, ruled by Mercury, the mind.
Yeah, exactly. I hope you guys can see how all of this is tying together. So take care of your mind, okay?
Yes. Listen to what your intuition is telling you.
Yeah. So he said that the migraines got worse after his brother Joseph passed away. They got worse.
More pressure now.
There's more pressure, exactly. Yep. And he said the pressure was on him to take the place of his brother, who was being groomed to become president. And the head is also what we call the crying region. And this is where you have to make decisions, okay? So this is kind of, where you're your thought process flows in, and now you have to make all of these decisions. And also the weight of the world is on the shoulders. So when you hear people say, oh, I feel like I have the weight of the world on me, that's a true thing, because now the decision is on you.
Yes.
The pressure is on you. And so these were the things that he was experiencing while going through all of this.
Right.
Oh, wow. Poor guy, man. You know? It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot to carry.
Yes. Well, life is a challenge.
It really is.
Life is a challenge.
It really is. Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, Jupiter is in alignment with his midheaven. The midheaven is the highest point in the sky.
Okay.
And so Jupiter is the planet of expansion. So that would create what he was meant to do in this life, makes it bigger, bigger, more pressure there. And then having Saturn, as I said before, in the 10th house, Saturn rules the 10th house. Saturn is the planet of achievement. So really needing to achieve, a lot of pressure to achieve. And then the moon in Virgo. Again, there's a lot of pressure for moon in Virgo people because they really hold themselves to a difficult standard of perfection, of being perfect, being the best. So,
well, that also, like I said, contributed to his drinking. Okay, he drank 4 to 5 times a day.
4 to 5 times a day.
That doesn't mean that it was 4 to 5 drinks. It was just 4 to 5 times a day he drank. That could have been 2 to 3 times each time.
Sure. Well, the drinking I attribute to Chiron in Pisces, because Pisces is the final sign, carries the weight of the 11 previous signs. So that creates a lot of pressure because you feel what's going on with everybody else.
Yeah.
But Pisces is also, so because of that feeling, there is a need to escape.
Yes.
A need to escape. Pisces is also ruled by the fish. And the fish, well, you know the phrase, drinking like a fish. Yeah,
yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
So you can see why drugs or alcohol would be an issue in his life.
Oh, yeah. My moon is in Pisces, and I can't drink as much as I used to, but I could put away. I could probably drink 12 grown men under the table in my heyday.
Yes.
So
I believe it.
And I didn't have half as much responsibility as he did. I was just partying.
Yep. Having fun.
Yeah, exactly. But interestingly enough, he said he still does not consider himself an alcoholic. He was like, I wasn't an alcoholic. It was normal. Everybody did it. He did it to take the edge off. And it was such a stressful job as president. And even before becoming president, it was a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. And he had all of these physical things going on too. So the drinking helped.
Yes. It was a part of the culture.
It was a part of the culture. Absolutely. I mean, women drank while they were pregnant and smoked cigarettes.
Totally.
So, I mean,
doctors would drink and smoke cigarettes while the pregnant woman was in the in the doctor's office, I imagine.
That's hilarious. Well, thank goodness people who were being born back then made it here safe.
They survived.
They survived, right?
Children are resilient.
Yes, yes. And he said that this calmed him down, and he could have gone a day without it, but he chose not to. So I just chose not to. Could have gone a day without it, right?
I could stop anytime. I'm just not going to. It's all good.
There's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is pretty much
the life.
The life.
Yes.
But we haven't even touched relationships yet.
Okay, yeah. Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about relationships.
Yes. What did you say?
So you guys heard me mention earlier about the emotional sexual. So your sexuality, which is your behavior, what you put out to the world, right? And we learn that behavior from the secondary caregiver in the family, which tends to be the father, okay? And the primary caregiver, we learn, which is the mother, we learn our suggestibility, which just means how you take in information, how you learn. So his sexuality, and this is just what I'm intuitively picking up on, because dad seemed like an emotional sexual, his sexuality would have also meant that he was an emotional sexual, okay? Because work and money was the first priority, career was the first priority, relationships and sex came at the bottom of the list. And then even though he was very, he dipped and dived and all splashed around a little bit, right?
Yes.
But this is actually one of the main characteristics, or I guess you could say personality traits of an emotional sexual, because they tend to want to protect themselves. Okay.
They want that detachment.
They want the detachment and they want that control in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So, an unhealed emotional sexual will have more than one partner.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, the relationships kind of fell at the bottom of the list. Love and all of that stuff came at the bottom of the list. And so he tended to have these affairs, and it was also like a defense mechanism for him. So to detach, to avoid being hurt or rejected. Because an emotional sexual goes into a relationship expecting to be hurt. So because of that, they kind of have this wall up, and unless they do the work to heal whatever the root cause of that behavior is, then you'll see this kind of playing out throughout their entire life.
Wow.
So this is my interpretation of what his sexuality was, okay? And again, this played out in all of his relationships with women, his wife, mistresses, and he had difficulty connecting intimately. That doesn't mean he couldn't get it up. That just means, intimacy is not all the time.
It's not performance.
Performance,
no,
right?
It's not performance.
Yeah, intimacy is being available, is
being vulnerable,
right?
Yep.
When did he have a chance to do that in his childhood? He never saw evidence of that behavior being played out in his household.
Right.
And our behaviors are learned, right?
From our parents.
From our parents, yeah.
And from our astrological code. So that's the thing. Like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? He had the parents he had because this is how the planets and stars were aligned. When I look at it, his 7th house line, his descendant, which is the doorway of the house of marriage. This indicates what you're attracted to and what you're bringing to the relationship. His descendant is in Aries. Aries is the ram. The ram is very determined to achieve dominance so that it can lead the pack. So he was attracted to confident individuals.
Yeah.
Aries is ruled by Mars. And Mars is about maintaining boundaries and borders, and this is my area, that's your area.
Yeah. Stay
away from, I'm not going to let you into my area wholeheartedly or fully. Maybe I'll let you pass through, but you're not staying here, sort of energy. So there is some boundary. I think that's what you were talking about a little bit.
Yeah.
So he wanted to be with confident women. He wanted to maintain his boundaries. And then having the moon in the 11th house, which is associated with the 11th sign, which is Aquarius, which represents the community. His emotions are a little bit detached in that he's emotionally connected to everyone. Yeah. I'm not holding on to my emotions for one person. I've got a lot of people to care about. So I can't just care about you. It doesn't make me a bad person. I just can't care for just one person. I got to care for a lot of people. And then, of course, the sun and Venus and Gemini, that's that curiosity. Hey, I like you. I like you. I like you. I like you. And then also being all that 8th house energy, just wanting to have that intimacy for a moment, but then pull back a little bit as well afterwards, because you don't want to get too deep. But there is some conflict there, because I feel like he wanted that intimacy, but people are complex. These astrological codes are very complex. It might say that you're one thing, and it might say that you're the complete opposite. Very curious, wants to connect with a lot of people sexually, but at the same time wants intimacy, but at the same time wants to protect himself and have boundaries and have enough love for everyone and not commit to one person. It's very complex.
It's very complex. Poor guy.
That's humans.
That's humans, right?
Yes.
And you said something really interesting, and I just kind of want to piggyback off of that for a moment about him being very attracted to confident women who have something going on in their lives. And this is also very telling of an emotional sexual as well. They are very attracted to people who are outgoing and have friends and have a life. But the moment that other person starts to become a little clingy or a little needy and kind of, well, I don't want to go out tonight. I just want us to be together. They back all the way off. Oh, wait a minute. You are not the person that I met 3 months ago, right? I want some of that energy. And the reason why they want some of that energy is because they tend to be very reserved themselves, and they can be a little bit of a hermit and be to themselves because they're so engaged with their work and their mission that, you know, they don't have that same super outgoing personality. They can turn it on when they need to.
Yes.
He was a very charismatic person because he needed to be, and he was able to do that. But honestly, you know, he could withdraw and just be with his work.
Well, this is the Gemini. Again, it's the twins. So when I think of Gemini, I think of there's the Gemini who's very gregarious, very charming, very funny. You know, it feels like you're best friends with them right away because they're so curious about you. They're asking you all kinds of questions. And then you meet that same person another time and they're showing you the other side, which is like, who are you? Yeah, I don't have time right now. They literally change.
We call that cycling.
Yes.
They're on and off, on and off, on and off. And if you learn that cycle, if you're a physical sexual and you learn that cycle, you can survive that relationship, you know? It's just a matter of knowing this particular concept, you know,
knowing who the person is. Okay, this is just who they are. Sometimes they're the most charming, fun person that you want to be around, and sometimes they're just so serious that you're like, who are you? Yeah. But that's not for you to get offended by them. They're not trying to offend you. They're just going through that cycle.
That's all it is. Yes. It's just a cycle.
Yes.
Yep.
Totally.
All right. So now let's get into death. Yes. So I like to tap into 3 days before the death.
Okay.
He said that he was feeling orphaned. Interesting choice of words.
Wow. Yeah.
Orphaned, alone, abandoned, uncertain about his place in the world. He felt like he didn't belong.
Makes so much sense. So much sense. Orphaned. Okay. Saturn, the planet of restriction, was transiting through the 4th house, which is the house of home, which represents the childhood.
Okay.
So restriction, childhood. At the same time, it was also in uncomfortable alignment with the moon, which also represents the childhood. So when Saturn is in uncomfortable alignment with the moon, or really any alignment with the moon, and especially when it's moving through the 4th house, you feel that sort of empty, orphaned, I'm all alone in the world feeling. Isolated. Wow. Yes.
Yeah, that is exactly what he was going through about 3 days before the death. Probably longer, but I asked specifically about 3 days before. He said that he was quite disappointed with his wife, with Jackie O, and his administration.
Okay.
He said that Jackie wanted to leave. They went through their whole thing. I'm not even going to get into all of that because that we would be here for 2 more days talking about it. But they went through their thing, you know. She got him, she understood him, and she positioned her life and herself to play her role and also get what she needed as well.
Yes.
You know. So there was a lot of infidelity, not just on his part, but on her part as well.
Okay.
But I think she was getting tired of it, and she had started kind of falling for somebody else. And around that time, she was ready to just call it quits.
Wow.
And he wasn't, you know, because again, an emotional sexual can stay in a relationship forever.
Why is that?
Well, because if it works for them, it's like, hey, I don't really want to get to know anybody else, you know. Just let me do what I'm going to do. I'll make sure you're happy.
Yes.
I'll make sure you have what you want.
Right.
Let's just do this thing. I'm taking care of everything.
Yes.
You're the first lady. Look at you. You know what I mean? It's like, you got the life.
Yes.
What are you complaining about?
Right.
So he could have stayed in it forever. But after a while, you know, especially for a woman, it's just not enough. And so he said that his administration, he felt like they were after him, like they wanted to kill him.
Wow.
So there was a lot of scandal going on around his death. Okay. And again, this is what I'm picking up on. This, you know, I don't know if this is etched in stone or not. So you guys just take this with a grain of salt here.
Cool.
Okay. So what came up was I pulled cards around this part of his life. And there were some players responsible for his death. It wasn't just some crazy person.
It wasn't just Lee Harvey Oswald on the fifth story of the book depository by himself with a rifle.
No, I wish it was that simple. And I mean, I don't know how security and CIA would feel about it if it was just that simple.
Right, exactly.
How did that happen?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So there's lots of movies out there too, guys, that you can watch that debunk that theory.
Right.
But basically, what came through for me when I did this reading, I pulled the Emperor, the Empress, okay, which represents an older man and a middle-aged woman that happened to be partners in business, okay? They were not married. They were just partners in business. They hired a witch. They hired somebody who works in the occult, okay?
Mm-hmm.
She came in as the high priestess when I pulled that card, okay? And this person assisted with cloaking and confusing the case.
Wow.
Okay, and this is a real thing, you guys. I am also a practitioner of magic.
You're a witch.
I am a witch, okay? So this is a thing. You can cloak and you can confuse things using manipulation of energy. So this is not some conspiracy pie in the sky thing. People hire witches all the time to do this kind of work if they're not doing the work themselves, okay? So the majority of your leaders and public figures and celebrities and things like that, they work with someone like me to assist them with gaining success and positioning themselves where they need to position themselves and move people out the way if they need to be moved out of the way. That has been happening since the beginning of time. So we can get rid of all the conspiracy
and they don't
hoopla.
Tell you about it when they do it.
They don't tell you about it. No,
That's
they
so
don't.
Weird. You would think they would give a press conference that said, I just met with a witch to help me win this Oscar.
Exactly. Or to help me win the election.
Yeah, the election, whatever it may be.
And to cloak and confuse things and to make sure nobody can really count it the right way, right? Yeah, it happens all the time. So, it's a way of life here on this planet. Magic is real and it's been in use since the beginning of time, okay? Time itself is magic, whatever. So we got to get over that, all of these people talking about, witches. Yeah. It's like, yeah, we exist. Yes. Hello, you're probably one too if you paid attention.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
You ever manifested a parking spot? You're a witch.
Yes. I love it.
So I also pulled the Page of Cups, the King of Cups, the King of Coins, and these all represented high-ranking people who hired people below them to assist with taking him out. Right. Now, why would they want to do that?
Because they don't want to be attached to the death of the president?
Well, that's one way, right? That's an idea. Scott, you're a genius. Well, okay, so this is the other thing that came up. I had to do a little bit of research around this. So something came up for me called the Harbinger Seals Corporation. This was a steel contracting and oceanography company. Okay. What came up was like covert operation building steel traps on the ocean floor that would magnetize a submarine, an enemy submarine, and scramble their technology. Okay. Makes sense, right?
Yeah, totally.
That's not woo-woo. That is something that could happen. That's probably happening right now, right?
Sure.
I have no idea what any of this shit means. This is just what came through, okay? Yes. So I don't know how true all of this is. But he wouldn't sign off on this particular deal, or I guess, what is it, like a legislation or whatever. I don't know what the terminology is. He wouldn't sign off on it because the construction would have ruined the habitat of the wildlife where they were trying to do it. I don't know exactly where in the world this was going to be happening. So days before his death, he said that he was just observing people around him, seeing what everybody's true colors were. And he was kind of like, had that like Scorpio suspicion going on, And he says that he's not sure if his wife had anything to do with it. He doesn't think so. But at that time, he was so highly suspicious of everybody, because he could feel that some shit was about to go down, right? He felt that. But he said he was like, I'd like to say no, but honestly, I'm not sure. Now, I did a little deeper dive into that, and I didn't feel like she was responsible for anything. I didn't pick that up on her energy. Right. And I told him that. I was like, I'm not picking that up from her.
Okay. How did you respond when you said that?
He was like, I'm not surprised she didn't. He was like, but honestly, he was like, you're telling me you asked me where I was 3 days before, and this is where I was, you know?
Right.
He was paranoid.
Rightfully so.
Rightfully so. He'd been getting like threats and things like, all kinds of shit was just happening. So she did want to leave, but he said he wouldn't give her that. He was like, that's, I kind of regret it because I kind of just held on to her,
Well, I mean, but you just have to think about the time. It's 1963.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to be the first president to divorce your wife. I mean, that's not going to go over well. So, I mean, I imagine that
the timing wasn't right.
It's like, okay, when I'm done being president, then sure, but not now.
Yeah, timing was way off for all of that. Like, that was not the time to be going through a divorce. So that is what came up for that. Now, there was some other stuff that came up where basically this could have been one of the reasons why he was assassinated. Okay. Also, during that time, that year, a lot of different stuff was going on around the world. There was a movie that came out that kind of goes into detail about all of the different world events that were taking place the year that he was assassinated and the big changes he was making, because he was signing off on a lot of stuff and he was like trying to end certain things. And the name of that movie was The 5 Cities of June, is a documentary, and it was all about 1963, which was the year that he was assassinated.
Yes.
And if you guys want to go and like check this documentary out, it's a pretty quick watch. It's not like super long, but it's really interesting because it kind of details everything that was happening that year. And when you watch this, you can see all of the events that took place around that time. It was like this energy that was building and building and building and building. And you just kind of get the feeling that a lot of people were not happy with the moves that he was making. So we can't really like point the finger at one person. You know what I mean? This is kind of like a collective type of a thing that took place here.
A conspiracy?
Oh.
Did they conspire to kill the president?
I don't know about using that word.
I know. They collectively decided to kill him. Collectively.
So let's just really quickly talk about some of the stuff that was covered in this documentary. So the events covered things like the activities at the Vatican with the election and the coronation of Pope Paul VI as successor to the late Pope John the 23rd. The launching of a Soviet rocket, and the background on the space race between the United States and the Soviet Union, battles in South Vietnam between communist and South Vietnamese soldiers, the integration of the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and the admission of African American students, Vivian Malone and James Hood, while Alabama Governor George C. Wallace stood by in opposition, and President JFK's trip to Berlin, Germany, and his remarks upon signing the Golden Book at the Rathis Schonenberg on Rudolph Wild Platz. So when I was doing this reading, Heston came in, and I was like, Heston? Yeah. And then I was like, okay, let me look up Heston. And then Charlton Heston came up. I'm like, what the heck does he have to do with this? Right. And that's when I found this documentary that he narrated. And this was all happening June 1963.
Wow. A lot of action happening.
A lot of action happening. Can you kind of tell us what the hell was happening? The stars that around that time?
Well, on November 22nd, 1963, the day that he was assassinated, the sun was at the final degree in Scorpio. And again, Scorpio is the sign of secrets, the sign of magic. So shrouding, hiding, doing something that you don't want others to see. The 29th degree is the final degree. The final degree is one of the most intense degrees. It's like all the energy builds to that final degree, and then it pops and moves into the next sign. So it's a very intense position. This sun at 29 degrees was in alignment with Kennedy's Saturn and with his part of fortune and his Chiron. Part of fortune is where you feel most fortunate. It's like your energetic treasure box, so to speak. So the fact that the sun was in alignment with Saturn, that brings some restrictive feelings, some isolation feelings again. The sun in alignment with Chiron, feeling the wound, paying a lot of attention to the wound. And then in alignment with part of fortune, it could be interpreted as like the luck has run out, so to speak. The North Node, which is the soul's purpose, was directly opposite Kennedy's North Node. So that again also, it's some kind of soul contract coming to an end is how I view that. Pluto, the god of death, lord of the underworld, the magic planet, the planetary ruler of Scorpio, was in stressful alignment with Venus. So that would bring about some transformation, stressful transformation to the relationship, to the marriage. And Uranus, the planet of the unexpected, was also in stressful alignment with Kennedy's sun, his identity. So going through some sort of unexpected shift to his identity, which is obviously what happened. And then it was also Jupiter, the god of thunder, the planet of expansion, was also in alignment with his sun. So having Jupiter, the planet of expansion, and Uranus, the planet of the unexpected, both in alignment with the sun, his identity, a big unexpected shift to his identity. That's what I'm seeing here. And then Saturn, as I mentioned earlier, was in an uncomfortable alignment with his moon, but it was also in alignment with his Venus. So that's restriction in the relationship. It was in stressful alignment with his Mars, the god of war, the planet of action. So just a lot of stress. A lot of stress I'm seeing here in his astrological code.
That makes perfect sense, because when I ended out our session together, I basically just asked him, as far as those last 3 days and everything leading up to it, what was kind of like the underlining thing going on with him on an unconscious level. And he said something really interesting. He said, I always strive to be the best at what I did because of how I was raised. But, I think on some level, I kept going even when I knew how dangerous it was, because I was tired and I wanted it to end. I wanted it to stop. I knew unconsciously death was probably my only way out.
So it's almost like he welcomed it.
An unconscious suicide.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. He was tired. So just to close out this reading that I did with JFK, I asked him what was like the underlining feeling or the thing that he felt led to his death. And what he said was, I always strived to be the best at what I did because of how I was raised. But I think on some level, I kept going even when I knew how dangerous it was because I was tired and I wanted it to stop. I knew unconsciously that death was my only way out. And so it was kind of like an unconscious suicide.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, you can see the pressure in the planets and stars in relation to his astrological code. And like I said earlier, with the Virgo moon, there's so much pressure on perfection. Yeah. And being the best. So with all the different planets squeezing his moon, his sun, his Venus, the emotions, the identity, and the relationship, it's almost like a pop. Yeah, it's like all of this pressure was building up from the time he was a child all the way up to his death. And because he was not living the life that he innately wanted to live, and he was running on a program instead of dealing with whatever wound
was there, it drove him to this place of kind of like just surrender. Like, okay, whatever happens at this point, I'm ready to go. Mm-hmm. And even if he wasn't saying it out loud, even if it wasn't conscious thought, nothing trumps that subconscious energy.
Yes.
You cannot deny that. You can never deny that about yourself, your life. It will always, always win.
It's kind of like there's the program that you're born with, mm-hmm. and then there's the programs that you're reconditioned with mm-hmm. through your experiences with your parents or peers or the TV or whatever it may be.
Exactly. That's exactly how it goes.
Yes.
And the ones that we are birthed with are the truest parts of ourselves.
The more you get off your innate program, mm-hmm. the more difficult life gets, the more the planets start to really grind on you to get you back to where you need to be.
Absolutely.
And he wasn't where he needed to be mm-hmm. in terms of his innate program.
Yep.
And so he got pushed, and willingly.
Yeah.
So to speak. So,
yeah.
Yes.
I mean, eventually, if you're not doing the work to uncover whatever the program is or the blockage is, then you do get worn down. You get tired, and you just you're just like, well, whatever needs to happen at this point, I'm okay with that.
Yes.
And if the stars are aligned, mm-hmm. death could be the thing that you are like, what needs to happen for you to get that rest, to get that reset, you know?
Absolutely.
And that's just where he was. That's, you know, so it's really interesting to take a look at it from that aspect, you know? It's important for us while we're still alive to understand how this works, you know, and understand how astrological charts play a huge, huge role. And also how it ties into the subconscious mind. And I know that that's our goal here. You know, we make it fun and interesting, tapping into the energies of those who've passed over. But ultimately, you know, we're here to help ourselves and everybody else get a full understanding of the importance of doing that work.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you, Shara.
Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome. And thank you to our listeners, mm-hmm. and thank you to JFK.
Yes, absolutely.
Want to honor him, absolutely,
mm-hmm.
for his openness with you and for his contribution as a human being.
Absolutely.
On planet Earth, it's very important.
His sacrifice.
His sacrifice, mm-hmm. absolutely.
Yep, big time.
Well, I'm excited for our next episode because we're going to be looking at Jack's brother, mm-hmm. Bobby. So I'm excited to get into that on the next one.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting layers to that one.
Yes.
That impact the entire family. So I can't wait to talk about that.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. See you then, Shara.
Yes.
You've been listening to The Uncharted Territories, where we see the unseen in the world of matter. If you would like to support the podcast, subscribe.
We've talked a lot about the subconscious mind and the importance of healing our wounds from the past. As an energy healer and a certified hypnotherapist, I help people understand how the mind works so they can harness the energy of the subconscious and tap into their inner power and make those positive long-term changes in their lives. If you're ready to make that change, you can book a session with me by connecting at opendoorhypnosis.com. I look forward to working with you.
If you'd like to learn more about who you are, where you come from, why you're here, and what you're meant to do with your life, contact me, Scott Tajarian, at theweeklytransit.com, and we will take a close, detailed look at your astrological code. My purpose is to help you understand who you are so you can accept, appreciate, and love the divine, unique miracle that is you.